Welcome to Smart Women Talking, the podcast that brings you unfiltered wisdom from women who have lived it all. From the boardroom battles to raising families, no topic is off limits, and every conversation is a treasure trove of insights, experiences, and heartfelt stories. Welcome. I'm Barbara Zulegger here with my lovely and brilliant co-host, Holly Meyer. Today, we are going to continue the conversation we began last time about becoming the future you. Last time we talked about the importance of knowing what matters to you, your values, what's your definition of quality of life, as you determine who is your future self, where do you want to move into for yourself. We talked about setting your RAS through vision boards and visualization. And today we're going to dive a little deeper into how to start to fill the gap between who you are today and how you see yourself in the future. Holly, you do a lot of this kind of work with your executive clients and the people that you work with. What's the first thing that you would suggest to start that journey of filling the gap towards your future self?
First of all, great question. And I am so excited about talking about this topic today. I think it's so important. So what do I suggest? My first thought would be monitoring our thoughts, because our thoughts create our destiny. We think about 60, 70, 80,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had the day before, and the day before that, and the week before that, and the month before that, and the year before that. It's a very human way of being. But that also means that your life is not going to change very much because you continue to think in the same way. Does that make sense?
It does. So what would you recommend? How do we start to recognize that and intentionally shift it?
Well, I like to follow Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm sure everybody knows who that is. And
Mm-hmm.
he has some really great videos out there on YouTube, particularly about this. And what he says on this topic is that those same thoughts that we have over and over and over again, day after day, they lead to the same choices. And those same choices lead to the same behaviors. And those same behaviors lead to the exact same experiences. But this is the important piece. We can expect the same emotions and feelings from those experiences because they're predictable, they're familiar, and it's those emotions that are the payoff that drive our very own thoughts and our behaviors and our actions. So what this means is how we think, how we behave, how we feel, all of that makes up our personality. And our personality becomes our personal reality. So according to Dispenza, the present personality who is listening right now to our podcast has created the personal reality that what they now call their life. So if you can latch onto this idea that if you want to create a new life, a new reality, then you have to change your personality, which means that you have to think about what you've been thinking about and then change it.
Okay.
So you have to become conscious of your unconscious actions and your habits and your behaviors and your emotions and your fears so that you can modify them. And when you look at your past emotions, they impact what we do every single day. They keep us tied to the past. And we have to decide by asking ourselves, do these emotions that are tying us to the past, do we want to bring these into the future? Heck, do they even belong into the future? Most people are trying to create a new personality, a new personal reality by keeping their old personality. We all know that doesn't work because we have to become somebody else.
So
So what are
what
your
I'm hearing you
thoughts?
saying is that to have that new personal reality, that's a result. We think we're going to create that right now, but it's a result of all this other cascading pieces you talked about. Thoughts become choices, choices become behaviors, behaviors become experience, and the experience becomes that personal reality. right?
Yes.
So where
Yes.
do we start with all of that? Where do the
Well,
emotions start to kick in? And where do we start with all of that?
so after time, right? This, if we continue to be tied to the behaviors that are tied to the emotions from, let's say, a specific event or something that may have happened. We might not even remember the event, but we remember the emotions, and it
Oh, yeah.
ties us to the past so that we are not going to change going into the future. And if we keep stuck in this pattern after years and years, what it does is it becomes a fixed pattern. So 90% of the time, we're just running the series of programs in our brain. So to actually make profound change, we have to disentangle ourselves from those old programs. And I know from personal experience that this brings a huge amount sometimes of discomfort. It brings uncertainty. It brings a lack of predictability. So people choose to stay where they're at, even if they don't like where they're at, because at least it's familiar, right? There's some predictability there. So emotions, they keep us anchored to the past. And what that does is it generates certain behaviors. So let me share something to prove this point. I know that as an executive coach, I know that networking and building my network is really important to the success of my business. But each time I get ready to go to a networking event, my internal anxiety starts to build. I get incredibly nervous as the closer I get to the event, and even like the night before, uh, I start to feel a lot of anxiety. Now, I know that once I get there, I actually have a lot of fun. I get to meet a lot of really great people. I feel connected. Everything always turns out fine. But what my brain and my body always zeroes in on every single time are those strong, anxious emotions that lead up to the networking event. Now, could it be because of negative experiences I had in the past? I'm guessing so, but I barely remember them. But my body remembers the emotions that were associated with those feelings. And then this causes me to self-sabotage, right? So for example, I go to bed early. I'm usually in bed between 9:30 and 10 p.m. unless there's a networking event bright and early at 7 a.m. tomorrow. When those are happening, well, now I'm watching the third episode on Netflix about 11:30 or 12:30, right? Or I'm scrolling social media, or I choose not to set my alarm thinking, oh, I'm going to get up. But either way, the outcome is that I'm not going to make it to that networking event, right? Because I, I'm feeling these emotions, which is making me feel uncomfortable, and I am wanting to get back to things that are predictable, even though they're not the best for me. But I want to feel that comfort. And so what's happening, which happens to most humans, our emotions keep us anchored to the past, right? We are wired there, or we can wire ourselves to a predictable future by visualizing the outcome of who we want to be when we are there. And that instead can guide our behaviors. So we have these programs that are really standing in the way between you and your future.
I love the way you said that. And I also like to follow Joe Dispenza, and I use a lot of his YouTube recordings and for meditation type purposes, which is awesome. You used a lot of his same wording, which I love, anchoring in the future versus being stuck in the past. And I think for me, kept coming back to me with my clients that I work with, which is more entrepreneurial than yours are. And it's about learning to embrace chaos, right?
Hmm.
And the emotions can cause chaos, right? I mean, think about when you're getting ready to go to, or should be getting ready to go to a networking meeting the next day, and you're creating little pockets of possibility of chaos for yourself unintentionally, but subconsciously, right? By not setting the alarm, by staying up later than usual to watch shows that you normally wouldn't watch at that time of night. Anytime we have change, anytime we move away from the status quo, we will find chaos. We start with, whatever status quo we're at, which in this conversation, when we're talking about future self, who we are today, this is our current status quo. The emotions we experience, the choices we make, the behaviors that we exhibit, they're all part of our today's personal reality. That's status quo. But we learn new things every day, right? We learn new things from podcasts. We learn new things from each other. We read new books. We learn something new every day. Sometimes we learn because there's a pain point we want to get away from. And that's when we're trying to learn intentionally. How do I get away from this? And sometimes we learn because we see opportunities ahead of us. Either way, it's new information. And that new information doesn't make any difference until we try to implement it. So you see my hands, I'm kind of doing the face of a clock. It's status quo, new information, implementation. Well, the next step on that clock is chaos. It's always chaos. If you're going to implement new information, if you're going to try and become the future you, if you're going to bring on a new product, if you're going to even go to a new networking meeting, there is some form of chaos that happens within us at that point. How big the change is, how resistant we are to it, those two things definitely figure in to how much chaos happens. Chaos is kind of the best friend of change, and they always come together. So when we get to that point, we have the three opportunities. Okay, there's three options when you hit that chaos point. You can say, this sucks. I don't like the way this feels. I'm going right back to where I was. And sometimes that new information was something that we tried and realized, yeah, that's not really for me. And you may go back to the previous status quo, but you can't unlearn whatever you've learned. So if it is still something that should be a part of what you are doing or who you are becoming, then we have to pick a different choice. Another choice could be, this sucks. This was a lot of work and a lot of chaos and uncomfortable emotions to get here. So I'm just staying right here because I don't want to go any further into chaos. But when we talk about the hands of a clock, right, it is bringing us all the way through if we can get through that chaos. So rather than stay stuck in that chaos, and let's face it, we all know somebody who has, and honestly, we all have done it to ourselves at some point, where it's like, I just can't get past this point because I'm afraid of what's next. Well, our third option when we get to chaos is to find the tools, the support, the people, the new way of looking at ourselves that helps us move to the new status quo. Once we're at that new status quo, we can see a different opportunity for ourselves. We can see a little more of the our future selves. We can see what's next for us. And then guess what? That happens with circles. We go back around again and again and again because our lives aren't static. We are always changing. It's a matter of whether we're changing intentionally toward who we want to be, or are we changing based on reacting to the people around us and the environment around us? I mean, how many hours do we spend watching the news? That changes who we are as well. And it's not always as pleasant. So taking a look at how we get through that chaos faster by identifying the emotions that you're talking about. And are they keeping me anchored in the past, or are they helping me move toward the future?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because if we want to move towards the future, then we also have to make a very compelling vision for what and who we are in that future self as well. Again, getting back to Dispenza, he talks about creating that compelling vision and holding it every single day, to literally shut your eyes and to see yourself reacting and being there, and the conversations that you're having with people and how you're feeling, and bringing the emotions into it and letting yourself feel safe and letting yourself feel excited and letting yourself feel good while you envision yourself creating that compelling vision for yourself in the future. And that pulls us towards that future. We're being guided by that. There's a similar take on all of this, and I saw that you brought the book out. It's the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And he talks about staying in our comfort zone. And I love how he uses the visual of the thermostat. And he believes that we are all set at a quote unquote 72 degrees. And that is where things feel comfortable, right? They're very comfortable for us. Things are unchallenging. But each time we step out of our comfort zone to move closer to our goals, that internal temperature then starts to rise. And we start to feel the uncomfortableness of it, the heat, the chaos, as you said, the tension. And so we then start to self-sabotage, to move ourselves back into what is feeling familiar and safe.
That seems to be human nature. I like the thermostat idea too. And the other side of this thermostat, which is a whole different story than Gay Hendricks' wonderful book, The Big Leap, is what happens at 212. I don't know if you've
Talk
seen,
more about that.
there's a video that you can also find on YouTube through Simple Truth, and it's called 212 degrees. Because 212 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale is when boiling water turns to steam. 212 is the transition point. It's the transformation point when water actually changes into steam. And at 211, it's not.
I feel that you're not carrying those emotions from your past anymore into your future, that your emotions no longer carry that weight going forward.
Absolutely. Think of how much lighter the steam is versus the water. I mean, when you talk about the weight of it, I love that. I think that that's a perfect analogy for what we're talking about. When we're, the 72 is uncomfortable or is comfort level, right? As we grow, we experience different levels of that. But it's like, okay, well, I wanted to grow. So I know I'm going to go through some of this and that's okay. It's getting warm, but hey, I like the warmth, right? It's when we get to that 200, 210, where it's like, that's the real chaos point. Because now we're ready for that transformation. And like you say, letting go of some of that weight of the past is essential to be able to make that transformation.
Yeah, and they say that the more you visualize your future and staying in the uncomfortableness until it becomes comfortable, that you literally change your brain. You change your brain into who you want to become. And Gay Hendricks has this really awesome mantra that I love. And I'm going to share it with you, and I'm going to read it here. It says, I expand in abundance every day. I expand in my success every day. I expand in my love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same. I love that mantra. And he suggests saying that every single day. He wants you to have it as your morning ritual. I would suggest speaking it out loud and bringing truth and voice to those words, because it isn't just a statement, it's an activation of your highest potential. And I like when I use mantras, and I brought them up last week as well, that when you use them, notice how mantras shift your focus from what you fear to what you want to attract.
Absolutely. I mean, who we want to become, right? We have to have some faith in ourselves and in how we are meant to be here in this world in order to be able to see that person, right? Well, there's both fear and faith are belief in something that doesn't exist right now. We fear something going, that we may step into it, that we may make a mistake. We may go a different direction. We may try something that doesn't work, right? All of those fears that can come up as we're thinking about who we want to be. But that's not any more real than that future self. And if we can spend the time embracing that and seeing that and making that real for ourselves in our mind and in our heart and how we feel, we have a much better chance of moving in that direction and attracting other people that can help us move in that direction because they're also going on that path.
Right. When we get to that place where we are really monitoring our thoughts, we're staying intentional about moving forward, we're recognizing the chaos moments, the tension, but still knowing that, okay, I'm feeling this tension. It must be tied to something in the past. I can't bring those things forward with me into the future, or things are never going to change. So I'm going to stay in this moment and I'm going to continue to move forward. You start to notice then, if you can just stay there, even if it seems like nothing's going to happen, stay there, monitor your thoughts, keep moving forward. And that's when all of the magic starts to be attracted to you. All of the, like you said, the people and the opportunities, you find them. They were always there, but now you're noticing them. This gets back to the RAS that we talked about last week.
Right. Absolutely. And we think emotions, happen within us automatically. If you think about the emotions of nervousness and excitement, your body feels very similar. Whether you label it as nervousness or you label it as excitement, you're telling your brain how I want to feel or what I want to think when my body feels this way.
Take on the body language. I'm excited for this. And open up your body language. It's going to make the shift happen so much faster.
The superwoman pose that my
Absolutely.
presentation coach taught me.
I wonder who that was.
Yeah, that wonderful woman, Polly Meyer, who is so good at telling us how to show up, right? And to be aware of how we feel and how that speaks to the people around us, whether we're presenting or just walking into a networking event. Does this person come in with a positive energy? Does this person come in with, energy that attracts others? Not all of us are extroverts, which I think surprises people sometimes when we do things like podcasts and we do speak and we do training with groups and we're coaches, right? Well, you must be very extroverted. No, really, I am when I'm energized and excited about what I'm teaching and what I'm talking about, but I have to recharge like an introvert. I have to go back to my cave and close the doors and spend a little time maybe with Joe Dispenza and get my energy level back up. So but you show up in that way so that other people who are on that same energy wavelength will see you come in and make eye contact with you and want to, meet you and get to know you a little bit. I think all of that makes such a difference in us becoming who we think we want to be. Who are you when you are your best self today? And who could that be 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, 2 years from now? All of that matters.
So I'm thinking that as we close this episode today, I think what we're leaving them with is this, that it's not about the new career. It's not about the health. It's not about the new relationship. It's not about the house. It's more about who you become. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Because in the long run, that's what really that's our legacy in a lot of ways. Because who we become, you think about who in your life, maybe in your family, who do you talk about? People with big personalities, people who had little quirks. We talk about the people, not necessarily, we may not remember everything they did or even know that, but we know how they impacted us. And we all, I think, want to impact each other in the best way possible. In order to do that, we have to be the best and truest person we can be based on who we are.
So what a great episode. This was probably one of my favorite episodes so far. I mean, we talked about being intentional with who we want to be. We talked about how emotions are anchored to our past and that can sabotage our success. We talked about the circle of chaos. We talked about connecting to the energy and the emotions of who we want to be.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I think there's so much more that we could dive into still with this, but I hope it's a great start for the people listening. This was just another great episode of Smart Women Talking, and where we continue the conversation of where wisdom doesn't whisper. It speaks boldly and unapologetically to everyone who's open to listening, right? I want to invite our listeners to join us for the third and final component of this conversation, where we're going to talk about how to show up as your future self right now, even before you feel like you're truly there. And we're hoping to have a special guest who is an expert on this topic, who is going to, if she can fit us into her schedule, is going to be joining us for a deeper conversation about how to show up as your future self today.
Wonderful. Thank you to your listeners, and we will see you next week.
Bye.